I'm 26 years old, and I just found out I don't exist. Not in the way you might think. I'm still here, still breathing, still able to feel my heart hammering against my ribs as I flip through the pages of my grandmother's recipe book. But my name? The name she wrote in careful cursive next to every single recipe for the past 8 years? Gone. Every page has been rewritten. Where, for my dearest Priya, used to appear in faded blue ink, there's now fresh black writing. For my beloved Kavya. My cousin Kavya, who never set foot in Nani's kitchen unless she was looking for something to steal. I'm sitting on the floor of my grandmother's empty house in Queens, surrounded by boxes that should have been mine. Should have been. Because according to the will that was read 3 days ago, Kavya Patel inherited everything. The house, the jewelry, the savings account, and this recipe book that was supposed to be my legacy. There must be some mistake, I'd whispered to the lawyer, my voice barely audible over the sound of my world crashing down. He'd adjusted his glasses and looked at me with something that might have been pity. I'm sorry, Miss Patel. The will is very clear. Everything goes to Kavya Patel, granddaughter. Granddaughter? Like I wasn't standing right there. Like I hadn't spent every weekend for the past decade learning to make perfect rotis under Nani's watchful eye. Like I hadn't been the one holding her hand when she died 2 weeks ago. But here I am, alone in this house that still smells like cardamom and betrayal, holding a book full of lies. Every recipe has been altered, not just the dedications. The recipes themselves have been changed. The measurements I memorized, the secret ingredients Nani whispered to me, the little notes about adding extra love or remembering to say a prayer while the dal was cooking. All different now. I flipped to the page for her famous samosas, the ones that made grown men weep. The recipe I could make blindfolded. But instead of the instructions I know by heart, there's a completely different version. Wrong spices, wrong proportions, wrong everything. My hands are shaking as I turn the pages faster, desperately searching for something, anything, that hasn't been erased. But it's all been rewritten. 8 years of Sunday afternoons. 8 years of Priya, Beta, come help Nani in the kitchen. 8 years of believing I was the granddaughter she loved most. All lies. The front door opens, and I hear footsteps in the hallway. Designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors that I helped Nani polish every month. Oh. Kavya's voice carries that particular brand of fake surprise that runs in our family. I didn't expect you to still be here. I look up at her from the floor. This cousin who used to borrow money from me and never pay it back, who missed every family dinner, but somehow showed up for every birthday with a handout. Kavya. I close the recipe book, holding it against my chest like armor. We need to talk. She's wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my rent, her hair perfectly styled, despite the fact that we buried our grandmother 48 hours ago. There's not a trace of grief in her carefully made-up face. Actually, Priya, I'm pretty busy today. The movers are coming to pack everything up. She glances around the room like she's already calculating what each piece of furniture might be worth. You should probably grab whatever personal items you want to keep. You know, before they get mixed in with everything else. Personal items. In the house where I'd lived every summer since I was 7 years old. This recipe book, I say, standing up slowly. Nani always told me it would be mine. Kavya laughs, a sound like glass breaking. Oh, sweetie. Nani said a lot of things. But what matters is what's written down, right? And according to her will, everything in this house belongs to me now. She reaches for the book, but I pull it back. Every recipe in here has my name on it, I lie, testing her. Does it? She tilts her head, her smile sharp as a knife. Are you sure about that? I wasn't always the favorite granddaughter. That distinction belonged to Kavya when we were kids, back when her charm worked on everyone and her lies were small enough to be dismissed as childhood mischief. But everything changed when I turned 18. That's when Nani pulled me aside after a particularly disastrous family dinner, where Kavya had forgotten to mention she'd dropped out of college and spent her tuition money on a trip to Vegas. Priya, beta, Nani had said, her weathered hands wrapping around mine. You come to the kitchen with me tomorrow. It's time you learned the real recipes. I thought she meant the measurements she never wrote down, the pinch of this and handful of that made her food legendary in our neighborhood. I had no idea she was choosing sides in a war I didn't even know we were fighting. Every Sunday for the next 8 years, I showed up at her house in Elmhurst at 10 a.m. sharp. Kavya would roll her eyes when she saw me there, usually sprawled on Nani's couch with her latest boyfriend, complaining about how boring family time was. Why does she always have to be here? Kavya would mutter, loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough that Nani could pretend she didn't. Priya helps me, Nani would say simply. She has good hands for cooking. Good hands. That's what she called it, when I could roll out perfectly round rotis on my first try, when I instinctively knew exactly how much salt to add to the curry without measuring. Kavya couldn't boil water without burning it, but somehow she was still the granddaughter who got the bigger bedroom when she stayed over, the one who never got in trouble for showing up 3 hours late to family events. But in the kitchen, it was just me and Nani. She'd tell me stories about growing up in Gujarat while I chopped onions, about my grandfather who died before I was born, about the recipes her mother taught her before she came to America with nothing but hope and a suitcase full of spices. These recipes, she'd say, watching me stir the dal with the exact rhythm she'd taught me, they're not just food, Beta. They're history. They're love. They're the only thing that connects us to who we were before. I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. The first red flag should have been last Christmas, when Kavya showed up to dinner with a designer purse that cost more than my car. When I asked where she got the money, she'd been unemployed for 6 months. She just shrugged. Nani's been helping me out, she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Family takes care of family, right? I found out later that helping out meant $5,000 for a business investment that never materialized. But at the time, I just felt that familiar sting of jealousy. Kavya got the money. I got the cooking lessons. It seemed like a fair trade. The second red flag was in March, when Nani missed our usual Sunday cooking session for the first time in 8 years. She said she wasn't feeling well, that she needed to rest. But when I stopped by that afternoon anyway, just to check on her, I saw Kavya's car in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see them sitting at the table, papers spread out between them. Official-looking documents with signatures and stamps. Nani looked tired, older than I'd ever seen her, while Kavya leaned forward with that intense expression she got when she really wanted something. I knocked, but Kavya came to the door instead of Nani. She's sleeping, Kavya said, blocking my view into the house. You should come back next week. Is she okay? She looked. She's fine, Priya. Just tired. You know how old people get. Old people get. Like Nani was just some stranger instead of the woman who raised us both after our parents divorced, who taught us Gujarati when our mothers were too busy working 3 jobs each to worry about preserving culture. I should have pushed past Kavya that day, should have demanded to know what those papers were, should have trusted the sick feeling in my stomach that told me something was very wrong. Instead, I went home and made excuses for why my grandmother suddenly seemed to have no time for me. Work was busy. She was getting older. Maybe she was just tired of teaching the same recipes over and over again. The third red flag was 2 weeks before she died, when I finally convinced her to let me visit. She seemed confused, asking me questions about people I'd never heard of, calling me by my mother's name. But in her lucid moments, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Priya," she whispered, "don't let them take everything. The recipes, they're yours. Remember that." I thought she was talking about preserving family traditions. I thought she was worried about the recipes being forgotten after she was gone. I had no idea she was trying to warn me. The first betrayal came in the form of a manila envelope slid under my apartment door at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning. The kind of timing that lets you know someone wants to catch you off guard before you've had your coffee or put on your armor for the day. Notice of probate proceedings was printed across the top in official black letters. Below that, a paragraph that made my blood turn to ice water. "You are hereby notified that a will dated March 15th, 2024 has been submitted for probate in the matter of the estate of Pushpa Patel, deceased. March 15th. 2 weeks before Nani died. 1 week after that strange visit when she'd seemed so confused, so unlike herself. I'd been at the hospital every day during her final week, holding her hand, reading her favorite Gujarati poems, making sure the nurses knew she preferred her water room temperature, not cold. Kavya had shown up exactly twice, once to complain about the parking fees, and once to take a selfie that she posted on Instagram with the caption, "Praying for my sweet Nani." But somehow, Kavya was the one who knew about a will I'd never heard of. I called the law office listed on the notice. The receptionist put me through to Mr. Henderson, the attorney handling the estate. "Miss Patel?" His voice was crisp, professional. "Yes, I've been expecting your call." "Expecting my call? I don't understand. My grandmother never mentioned updating her will." There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "According to our records, Mrs. Patel came in on March 15th with her granddaughter to execute a new will. The previous will from 2018 has been superseded." "Her granddaughter? That was me, right?" "Priya? Let me check. No, I'm sorry. The witness signature shows Kavya Patel was present during the signing." My legs gave out. I sank into my kitchen chair, the phone pressed so hard against my ear it hurt. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Nani was barely speaking that week. She had pneumonia. She was on medication that made her confused." "Miss Patel, I understand this is difficult, but Mrs. Patel appeared to be of sound mind when she signed the documents. The will is very specific about her wishes." Sound mind. The woman who'd called me by my dead mother's name, who'd asked me 3 times in one visit why my grandfather wasn't coming to dinner. I hung up and immediately called Kavya. "Oh, hey, Priya." Her voice was bright, cheerful, like we were discussing weekend plans instead of our grandmother's suspicious final will. "I was wondering when you'd get that notice." "Kavya, what the hell is going on?" "What do you mean?" "The will. Nani changed her will 2 weeks before she died?" "Well, yes. She wanted to make sure everything was in order. You know how she worried about paperwork and stuff." "Stuff. Our grandmother's life reduced to stuff. Why didn't you tell me she was planning to do this?" "Honestly, she asked me not to. She didn't want you to feel obligated to argue with her decisions. You know how you can get about family stuff, all emotional and dramatic. All emotional and dramatic. That's what caring looked like to Kavya. What about the recipe book? I asked. She always said, Priya. Kavya's voice turned gentle, the way you talk to a child who believes in Santa Claus too long. I know Nani said a lot of things over the years, but people change their minds, especially when when they're not thinking clearly. She was thinking clearly enough to change her will? The lawyer seemed to think so. That night, I drove to Nani's house and used the key she'd given me years ago. The house felt different already, like it knew it didn't belong to our family anymore. I went straight to the kitchen and opened the recipe book. Every single page had been rewritten, but not recently. This wasn't fresh ink or hurried handwriting. This was careful, deliberate work that had taken time. Weeks, maybe months. The paper showed slight indentations where someone had pressed hard, concentrating on getting every letter perfect. I knew that handwriting. I'd seen it on birthday cards and Christmas presents my entire life. It was Nani's handwriting, but it wasn't Nani's words. Someone had made her rewrite every recipe, made her erase 8 years of "For my dearest Priya" and replace it with "For my beloved Kavya." Made her change ingredients and measurements until the recipes I knew by heart were unrecognizable. I pulled out my phone and called Kavya again. "This is getting ridiculous, Priya." "Did you make her rewrite the recipe book?" "What? No, of course not." "Why would I do that?" "Because every recipe that used to have my name on it now has yours. Maybe she just realized she wanted me to have them instead." "Bullshit, Kavya. These aren't even the right recipes. The samosa filling is completely wrong. The measurements for the chai are..." "How would you know what the right recipes are?" Her voice turned sharp, defensive. "Maybe you just remembered them wrong. Maybe Nani never actually taught you as much as you think she did." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. My cousin, my own blood, had just suggested that 8 years of my life were a delusion. 2 weeks later, I learned that betrayal has layers. The first layer was financial. I found out when my bank called to inform me that a check I'd written for my student loan payment had bounced. Impossible, since I'd just deposited my paycheck 3 days before. "Ma'am, your account shows a balance of negative $437, the representative said, her voice professionally sympathetic. "There was a large withdrawal yesterday for $8,200. $8,200. The exact amount of the joint savings account Nani and I had opened 2 years ago for my medical school applications. The account she'd insisted on setting up because education is the only thing no one can take from you, Beta. Apparently, someone could take it from me after all." I drove straight to the bank, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. The manager, Mrs. Chen, had known Nani for 15 years. She looked genuinely confused as she pulled up the account records. "Miss Patel, I'm so sorry for your loss. Your grandmother was such a lovely woman." She scrolled through the screen, her eyebrows furrowing. "It says here that the account was closed yesterday by..." "Oh, this is strange." "What's strange?" "The signature card shows that Kavya Patel was added as a joint holder on March 14th, just 1 day before..." She trailed off, realizing what she was saying. March 14th. The day before Nani allegedly went to the lawyer's office to change her will. The day before she supposedly decided to cut me out of her life entirely. "I need to see that signature card," I said. Mrs. Chen hesitated. "I'm not sure I can..." "Please, That's my grandmother's signature. I need to see it." She printed out the document and slid it across the desk. There it was. Pushpa Patel, written in Nani's careful script. But something was off. The loops in the P's were too perfect, the spacing too even. It looked like someone had practiced it hundreds of times before writing it on an official document. Below Nani's signature was Kavya's, bold and confident, like she was signing her own name to a birthday card instead of stealing $8,000 from her dying grandmother. "This doesn't look right," I said, pointing to Nani's signature. Mrs. Chen leaned closer, studying the writing. Her expression grew troubled. "You know, now that you mention it, your grandmother's hands were shaking quite badly the last few times she came in. Parkinson's, I think she mentioned. But this signature is very steady. Very steady. Unlike the woman who'd barely been able to hold a spoon 2 weeks before she died." That night, I went through every document I had from Nani's final months. Electric bills, prescription receipts, insurance paperwork. Her signature on everything was shaky, uncertain, nothing like the confident script on the bank documents or the will. I called Kavya for the 3rd time that week. "Jesus, Priya, what now?" "You forged her signature." Silence. "You forged Nani's signature on the bank documents. Probably on the will, too." "That's a serious accusation." Her voice was different now, colder. "You better be very careful about what you're saying." "I'm saying you're a thief. I'm saying you manipulated a dying woman into signing away her granddaughter's inheritance." "Prove it." 2 words that hit me like a physical blow, because she was right. How could I prove it? Nani was gone. The money was gone. The house would be sold within the month, according to the eviction notice I'd found taped to my apartment door that morning. Eviction notice. Because apparently, I'd been living in Nani's rental property, rent-free, for 2 years, and the new owner, Kavya, had decided my lease was terminated immediately. "You're kicking me out of my apartment?" "It's not your apartment, Priya. It never was. Nani was just being generous. But I can't afford to carry family members anymore. I hope you understand." Family members. Like I was some distant relative instead of the granddaughter who'd spent every weekend for 8 years learning her recipes. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know. Figure it out. You're 26 years old, not 16. Time to grow up." The line went dead again. I sat in my apartment, Kavya's apartment, surrounded by boxes I couldn't afford to move and furniture that apparently didn't belong to me. Everything I'd thought was mine, every security I'd built my adult life around, had just been revealed as an illusion. But the worst was yet to come. That weekend, my Aunt Mira called, Nani's youngest daughter, the one who'd always been closest to me growing up. "Priya, Beta, I heard about the will. I'm so sorry." "Aunt Mira, something's not right about this. Nani would never... Actually, sweetheart, I need to tell you something. About Nani's final weeks." The tone in her voice made my stomach drop. "What about them?" "She was saying things. About you. Things that didn't make sense, but... Well, she seemed so certain." "What kind of things?" "She said you'd been stealing from her, taking money from her purse, using her credit cards. She said she caught you going through her jewelry box, looking for things to sell." The floor tilted beneath my feet. "That's insane. I never took anything from Nani. Ever." "I know, Beta. I know." But she was so convincing. She had evidence. Evidence? Credit card statements showing purchases you supposedly made. Photos of you in her bedroom, near her jewelry box. She said Kavya had to help her change the locks because she was afraid of what you might take next. Photos of me in her bedroom. I'd been in that room 100 times, helping her organize her medications, bringing her tea when she was sick, reading to her when she couldn't sleep. But someone had turned those innocent moments into evidence of theft. Someone had spent months building a case against me, using my love for my grandmother as proof of my guilt. "Aunt Mira," I whispered, "who showed her these photos?" But I already knew the answer. I hit rock bottom on a Thursday at 3:17 a.m., sitting on the floor of my almost empty apartment with a bottle of wine and my grandmother's recipe book. Everything was gone. The apartment I had to vacate in 6 days. The savings account that was supposed to get me through medical school. The inheritance that should have been mine. Even my family. Because by then, the lies had spread to everyone. My uncle Raj had stopped returning my calls after Kavya showed him evidence that I'd been forging Nani's checks. My cousin Rohan, who I'd grown up with like a brother, sent me a text that said, "I can't believe you would steal from Nani. Don't contact me again." Even my own mother started questioning me. "Priya, Beta, just tell me the truth," she'd said during our last phone call. "If you needed money, why didn't you just ask? Why did you have to take it from Nani?" "I didn't take anything from anyone, Ma." "But Kavya has receipts, Beta. Credit card statements with your signature. Photos of you going through Nani's things when she wasn't looking. Photos of me helping my grandmother organize her jewelry box so she could remember where everything was. Credit card signatures that looked like mine because Kavya had practiced my handwriting just as carefully as she'd practiced Nani's." "Ma, please. You know me. You raised me. Do you really think I'm capable of stealing from my own grandmother?" The pause that followed was longer than it should have been. "I don't know what to think anymore, Priya." That's when I understood the true genius of what Kavya had done. She hadn't just stolen money or a house or a recipe book. She'd stolen my identity, my relationships, my entire place in the family. She'd turned 8 years of love into 8 years of evidence against me. I was sitting there with the recipe book open to the samosa page, the one that now had completely wrong ingredients, when I saw it. A tiny piece of white paper sticking out from behind the binding. So small I'd missed it during all my previous desperate searches through the book. I pulled it out carefully. It was a receipt from Staples, dated February 28th. Just 2 weeks before Nani's supposed change of heart. 1 bottle Goo Gone, 1 pack fine-tip black pens, 1 bottle India ink. Goo Gone, for removing old ink from paper. My hands were shaking as I held the receipt up to the light. There, in the corner, was a handwritten note in Nani's actual shaky writing. "Kay says, this will help preserve the recipes for the family. K. Kavya." I flipped through the recipe book again, this time looking for traces of the original writing. And there they were, ghost impressions where the old ink had been removed. Faint shadows of the words, "For my dearest Priya," bleeding through the careful new script. Kavya hadn't just rewritten the recipes. She'd erased them first, removing every trace of my name before replacing it with hers. And she'd convinced our dying grandmother that she was preserving family history by doing it. I grabbed my laptop and started researching. Forgery laws in New York. Elder abuse statutes. How to prove document tampering when the victim is dead and buried. 3 hours later, I had a plan. But first, I needed help. And there was only one person left who might believe me. Mrs. Chen from the bank had given me her personal number after our conversation about the suspicious signature. "If you find anything else that seems off," she'd said, "please call me." Your grandmother was a good customer, and something about this whole situation doesn't sit right with me." I called her at 8 a.m. sharp. "Mrs. Chen, it's Priya Patel. I found something." 2 hours later, we were sitting in her office with a handwriting expert named David Morrison. He looked like an accountant, but he had 30 years of experience testifying in fraud cases. "These signatures," he said, examining the bank documents through a magnifying glass, "are definitely not from the same hand." He showed us the comparison. Nani's real signature from 2023, shaky and uncertain due to her Parkinson's. The signature on the March 14th bank documents, steady and practiced. "This is textbook forgery," Morrison continued. "See how the forger has tried to compensate for the shakiness by making the letters too perfect? Real tremor signatures have inconsistent shake patterns. This has artificial shake patterns." Mrs. Chen leaned forward. "Is this enough to press charges?" "It's definitely enough to start a criminal investigation. Bank fraud, elder abuse, forgery. We're looking at serious felony charges here." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. Hope. The kind of hope that comes with having evidence, having experts, having the truth on your side for once. But Kavya wasn't done with me yet. That afternoon, she called. "I heard you've been talking to people at the bank," she said, her voice honey-sweet with threat. "Making wild accusations." "They're not wild, and they're not accusations. They're facts. Here's a fact for you, Priya. I have videos of you going through Nani's purse. I have text messages where you're asking her for money. I have a whole timeline of your theft and manipulation of a sick old woman." My blood went cold. "Videos? Oh, yes. Security cameras are amazing these days, aren't they? So small, so easy to hide. I've been documenting your behavior for months, just in case something like this happened." "Something like what happened?" "Something like you trying to destroy our family because you couldn't accept that Nani finally saw through your lies." She hung up, leaving me staring at my phone and wondering how deep this rabbit hole really went. But I wasn't the same person who'd found that first manila envelope under her door 6 weeks ago. That person had been naive, trusting, willing to believe that family meant something. This person was ready for war. The final battle began with a single Google search. Kavya Patel, New York criminal record. I'd never thought to look before. Why would I? She was family. But sitting in my empty apartment at 2 a.m, fueled by rage and determination, I started digging into my cousin's life with the thoroughness of a private investigator. What I found made my stomach drop. 2 arrests for credit card fraud in 2019. A dismissed case for identity theft in 2021. A civil judgment for embezzlement from her former employer in 2022. Kavya Patel wasn't just a liar and a thief. She was a career criminal. And somehow, none of us had ever known. The next morning, I drove to the Queens District Attorney's office with a folder full of evidence. Bank documents, the receipt for ink removal supplies, expert testimony about the forged signatures, and now a criminal history that showed a clear pattern of financial abuse. Detective Maria Santos listened to my story with the practiced patience of someone who'd heard similar tales 100 times before. But when I showed her the handwriting analysis, her expression changed. "This is good work," she said, studying the comparison charts. "Your cousin made one crucial mistake." "What's that?" "She got greedy. If she'd just taken the money and left everything else alone, we might never have been able to prove anything. But changing the will, altering the recipe book, trying to rewrite 8 years of history, that's where she left too many traces." Detective Santos opened a formal investigation that afternoon. Within a week, they'd obtained warrants for Kavia's financial records, her phone, her computer. What they found was a digital trail of premeditation that stretched back 10 months. Email drafts practicing Nani's signature. Google searches for "How long does Parkinson's take to kill someone?" Online purchases of spy cameras and recording equipment. And most damning of all, a detailed plan, written in Kavia's own words, outlining exactly how she intended to manipulate our dying grandmother. The plan was titled Project Inheritance, and it was 23 pages long. Pages detailing how she would isolate Nani from me by creating fake evidence of theft. How she would use Nani's medication schedule to find windows when she was most confused and suggestible. How she would systematically rewrite the recipe book to remove any trace of my relationship with our grandmother. The goal, she'd written in bullet points, is to create a narrative where Priya appears increasingly untrustworthy, while I position myself as the reliable, protective granddaughter. The old woman's confusion works in our favor. She won't remember what really happened versus what I tell her happened. Our favor. She'd referred to manipulating our dying grandmother as a team effort with some unnamed accomplice. But the worst part was the final page, where she'd calculated exactly how much money she expected to inherit and how she planned to spend it. $8,000 from the joint savings account. $45,000 from Nani's life insurance. An estimated $200,000 from selling the house. She'd put a price tag on my grandmother's life, and it totaled $253,000. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't there. Detective Santos had advised me to stay away, so Kavya couldn't claim I was orchestrating some kind of revenge plot. But my Uncle Raj called me afterward, his voice shaken and confused. They arrested Kavya, Beta, at her work, in front of everyone. The charges: fraud, elder abuse, forgery. They're saying she stole from Nani? She did steal from Nani, Uncle. She stole from all of us. But the evidence she had against you was fabricated, all of it. The photos, the credit card statements, the videos she claimed to have. She spent months building a case against me so no one would believe me when I figured out what she'd done. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, "I owe you an apology, Priya. You owe me more than that. You all do." The trial took 8 months. During that time, the truth slowly spread through our family, like sunlight burning off fog. One by one, my relatives called to apologize, to ask forgiveness, to claim they'd always suspected something wasn't right about Kavya's version of events. I accepted some apologies. Others, I let go to voicemail. The recipe book became a key piece of evidence. The forensic document examiner testified that every single page had been chemically altered to remove the original writing. Under UV light, my name appeared like ghostly watermarks throughout the book. For my dearest Priya, bleeding through layer after layer of lies. Kavya pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence. Elder abuse, bank fraud, forgery, identity theft. The charges carried a combined maximum of 15 years in prison. She got 7 with the possibility of parole in 4. At her sentencing hearing, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I'd written a 20-page speech about betrayal and family and the theft of memories. But when the moment came, I found myself saying something much simpler. Your Honor, Kavya Patel didn't just steal my grandmother's money. She stole 8 years of love and turned them into evidence against me. She made me doubt my own memories, my own worth, my own place in my family. She took a dying woman's confusion and used it as a weapon to destroy the granddaughter who loved her most. I looked directly at Kavya for the first time since her arrest. She was smaller than I remembered, diminished by her orange jumpsuit and the weight of her crimes. But she failed, I continued, because love isn't something you can erase with Goo Gone and a fine-tip pen. It's not something you can forge or steal or rewrite. And in the end, the truth always surfaces. The judge sentenced her to 7 years. The restitution order required her to repay every penny she'd stolen, plus damages. But some things can't be paid back. I never got those final weeks with my grandmother. I never got to say goodbye properly, or to tell her that I understood why she seemed so distant and confused toward the end. Kavya had poisoned our relationship with lies, and now Nani was gone, and I would never be able to explain the truth to her. That loss, the theft of closure, of a proper goodbye, is something no court can remedy. I kept the recipe book, of course. It was returned to me after the trial as part of the restored estate. I spent months carefully removing Kavya's alterations, using museum-quality techniques to restore the original writing underneath. Most of it came back. For my dearest Priya emerged from beneath the lies, along with all the little notes and measurements and stories my grandmother had written just for me. The recipes themselves were harder to restore. Some of Kavya's changes had damaged the paper permanently. But I remembered them anyway. 8 years of Sunday afternoons had taught me more than any written recipe could capture. I knew exactly how Nani's kitchen smelled when the cumin seeds were perfectly toasted. I knew the exact rhythm of kneading that made her rotis perfectly round and soft. Kavya had tried to erase my relationship with my grandmother, but she'd forgotten something crucial. Memory lives in more places than ink on paper. 6 months after the trial ended, I opened a small restaurant in Jackson Heights called Nani's Kitchen. The walls are covered with photos of my grandmother and copies of her restored recipes. Every dish is made exactly the way she taught me, with the secret ingredients she whispered to me during those precious Sunday afternoons. On opening day, I served free samosas to anyone who wanted them. The recipe was perfect, the one Kavya had tried to destroy, now restored to its original proportions. Customers lined up around the block, drawn by the smell of cardamom and memory. My Aunt Mira was the first person in line. "It tastes exactly like Nani's," she said, tears in her eyes. "Like she's right here with us." She was right here with us, in every perfectly spiced potato, every golden brown crust, every careful fold of the pastry. Kavya had tried to steal my inheritance, but she'd missed the most important part. The real legacy wasn't money or property, or even recipes written in a book. It was love and knowledge, and the unbreakable bond between a grandmother and the granddaughter who truly listened. Some things can't be forged. Some things can't be erased. And some things, once you really know them, become part of who you are forever.